Stains. Come outside.
Take your outside, homeboy.
East Coast. Come outside, nigga. Come outside. You toast K, right? I ain't got money in his pocket. Easy. Come on.
Young niggas from the pack, you don't wanna play around. You try to show a deuce. Man down, I'm a nigga over here. You in the nigga, ain't no time. I mean 30 in the Glock when they try to come around.
LAPD out here investigating. We saw them laying evidence markers earlier. They are looking for two suspects here who apparently shot this woman.
Police arrived. They found a large crowd gathered at the scene. One person was dead. At least two others were wounded. Police say some of the people who were shot had left the area and driven themselves to the hospital.
It itself took place behind me in this parking lot at a pop-up taco stand, a regular thing here on the weekend.
Right, looks like
They say anything?
Nope.
Come on, straight out. You know what's up.
They didn't claim no shit.
Did
I don't
this
know
car
who it
drive
was.
by earlier?
Nope.
Anybody throwing any signs?
The Pacc East Coast Crips, they're in the alliance of 4 Crips in Los Angeles, with one of the most deadly reputations in the city. And they're known for numerous violent acts, including daily shootouts, drive-bys, and multiple set-up murders. Having some of the oldest Crips heads in Los Angeles, they have a deep history that stretches all the way back to the 1970s, with more than a few prominent members attached to this gang. So they definitely have a story to tell. Yeah. All right. Welcome to Cali's Most Dangerous. Let's get into it.
LAPD out here investigating. We saw them laying evidence markers earlier. They are looking for two suspects here who apparently shot this woman dead.
On May 29th of 2007, at approximately 8 p.m., engaged to be married couple Karina Mitchell and Manuel Figueroa and their kids 11-year-old Brianna and the couple's 5-year-old son Jacob drove to 67th Street in Maine in Los Angeles to get dinner at a neighborhood taco truck. The couple, they parked their Honda in a well-lit parking lot next to the taco truck, ordered their food, and waited with around 10 other people. Michelle was wearing her diamond engagement ring and a gold necklace and carrying a designer purse, which wouldn't have been an issue had the couple been eating in Brentwood or Beverly Hills. But they were eating in one of the most deadly areas in Los Angeles and in the territory of the 6'6" East Coast Crips, who fall under the Six-Pack Alliance. And unfortunately, her jewelry and expensive attire made her a target in this area. While the children ate their meals in the backseat of the car, Figueroa waited for his and Michael's food at the truck while Michael walked back to the car with the family's drinks. Once at the car, she placed the drinks on top of the car and reached into her purse. Sadly, Brianna and Figueroa then heard a gunshot, followed by them seeing Michelle fall to the ground. After that, Figueroa, he seen well-known Six-Pack East Coast Crip member Jason Martin running from between the Honda and another car with a gun in his hand. He then heard 2 more gunshots as Martin ran towards 62nd Street. Figueroa then hurried to the car, where the children were screaming, and he found Michelle on the ground, non-responsive and bleeding from a gunshot wound to her head. Meanwhile, Carlos Gomez was visiting his friend Nelson Ramos at an apartment building located on 62nd Street in Maine. Just before the shooting, the two, they were standing on Ramos' narrow balcony. And while hanging out, both Gomez and Ramos, they saw Martin walking out of the alley and into the parking lot where the taco truck was located. Because Ramos' daughter was crying, the 2 men walked back inside their apartment. But shortly thereafter, they heard a gunshot and returned to the balcony. Once on the balcony, the 2 men observed Martin running back towards the alley. As Gomez and Ramos watched, Martin stopped by the entrance of the apartments building parking lot, looked up at the balcony, aimed, and fired a single shot at the men. Gomez and Ramos then dove to the floor inside the apartment, followed by Ramos looking outside the window. Again, we seen Martin fleeing down the alley. Michelle, she died from a gunshot wound to her forehead, stippling around her room, and so she had been shot close range. Michelle's necklace had been broken. It and her engagement ring, they were discovered in her jacket though. A broken clasp to the necklace was found nearby. Her Dooney and Burke purse, it was found on the ground, open, and some of the contents were scattered. An expended bullet, it was beneath her leg. 2 9mm cartridge cases, they were recovered from the scene. One from the flatbed of a truck next to Michelle's body, and a second in the middle of 62nd Street, where Martin was seen running. The following day, the Los Angeles City Council, they offered a $50,000 reward and publicized the reward on a flyer. As a result of a call to a homicide hotline, Martin was identified as a suspect, and a 6-pack photographic lineup containing his photograph was prepared. And after that, Figueroa, Ramos, Gomez, and Sanchez identified or tentatively identified Martin in the photographic lineup. Martin was arrested on June 21st of 2007. In his bedroom closet, officers found a backpack with East Coast Crip writing on it, a notebook containing East Coast Crip writings, and photographs, one of which sold to make an East Coast Crip sign. In the end, Martin was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 2 life terms in prison. Definitely rest in peace to Karina Mitchell. While this was a murder robbery, she was still in the heart of an area that had one of the most deadly wars going on at the time. With the East Coast Crips and the Ferencia 13 been engaged in not only a gang war, but an intense racial war that graduated from one of its gang affiliations. This wars came to an end as of 2019 after both gangs agreed to a truce, but when it comes to the Pacc East Coast Crips, they're involved in numerous other turf battles that set the city on fire. Trust me, this tragic situation, it doesn't even scratch the surface of their daily ways. When it comes to the six-pack section of the East Coast Crips, they've had several shot callers who have made them one of the most respected and feared subsets of the East Coast Crips, including members like Paul Gregory Wallace, also known as Doc. But let's get into history as we address these and other situations.
In the home, there's no work. In the home, there's no man. The mother uses in the home by herself. She's on welfare, and she's been on welfare for 2 or 3 generations. She's a product of that. She probably is either on dope or hustling from one way or the other.
History of the Six-Pack East Coast Crips. When it comes to the history of these guys, to fully understand it, we got to get into the history of the East Coast Crips in general. First off, the East Coast Crips, they're not a specific gang, but an alliance of several different gang identities in Los Angeles County, in 3 different jurisdictions. But the birthplace of this gang, it resides in one of the most grimiest parts of Los Angeles. Nigga, I'm not playing either. If you ever end up in this area, just keep driving. Damn near run a couple of lights if you have to. Don't stop for nobody. And if you walking, nigga, just pray you don't get pressed, robbed, or shot at. Anyways, they start off as the East Side Crips to help distinguish themselves from the West Side Crips that came earlier on. The creation of the East Side Six Deuce Crips in around 1974 spawned the alliance now known as the East Coast Crips. But don't get it twisted, many of the gangs that make up the East Coast Crips, they'd already existed since the early 1970s, under different names, such as the Q102 Town Street Boys, the 6'9 Shack Boys, the 7'6 Shack Boys, and the 118 Block Crip. It's alleged that the 62nd Streets, they may have been the first sets to put East Coast on it during the 1970s, but they're not the oldest set of the East Coast Crip card. So if it's any members or anybody tapped in, y'all let me know in the comments, what was the first gang of the East Coast Crip ever established? But let's get into the individual gangs that fall under the Six-Pack Alliance.
The moral fabric in Los Angeles is broken down. There's no sense of morality. There's no thou shalt nots. There's no stop signs. Anything goes.
Originated in the 1970s, around 62nd Street and San Pedro Street, the Six Deuce neighborhood East Coast Crips are predominantly an African-American street gang located on the east side of South Central Los Angeles, in the area near 62nd Street and Main. Parts of their turf for West and Main Street to the Harbor 110 freeway, which is considered the west side, but they maintain their east side identity. Most indications, they suggest that the Six Deuce East Coast Crips are the first neighborhood Crip on the east side of South Central Los Angeles, and the creation of this set by Raymond Washington inspired the creation of the East Coast Crip Alliance, in which older gangs gradually joined, such as the earlier mentioned Q102 Boys, 7'6 Shack Boys, and the 6'9 Shack Boys.
Gangbanging ain't gonna end, man. You can't end gangbanging, man.
It's not the point of ending it. It's the fact of protecting people, protecting little bitty innocent kids, you know. Nobody's trying to end the gangbanging because it's been going on for years and years, way since back in the 60s. And it ain't gonna stop, you know. But nobody's trying to stop it. They're just trying to, trying to calm down on it because too many people are getting killed.
The white man try to make money off of it. You see they reporting?
When it comes to the formation of the 6'6 East Coast Crips, while respected and feared today, they're one of the younger branches of the East Coast Crips in the city, allegedly being established in the 1990s, but y'all let me know in the comments if this is true or not. On top of that, it's alleged that this section of the East Coast Crips, along with the 190 East Coast Crips, has a heavy tie to the Black Mafia, helping them move heavy loads of drugs throughout Los Angeles. But once again, y'all let me know in the comments if this is true or not. When it comes to the 6'8 East Coast Crips, I couldn't find too much information in terms of when they were founded, but y'all let me know in the comments if y'all can find any information on that. When it comes to the 6'9 East Coast Crips though, they've been around for a while. The 6'9 East Coast Crips, who were originally known as the 6'9 Shack Boys, are a predominantly African-American street gang located on the east side of South Central Los Angeles, and they're among one of the most oldest gangs. Been founded during the early 1970s when they were simply known as the Shack Boys. Throughout the years, this section, they've had more than a few militant members who have made them one of the most feared in their section of Los Angeles, including Paul Wallace, also known as Lil Doc, who was initiated into the 6'9 East Coast Crips in the 1970s. and quickly rose through the ranks to become one of the gang's most influential members. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, he was known as a drug dealer amongst the locals and a top supplier for the gang. For years, whether in prison or the streets, he operated as a senior leader for the gang, calling several shots for the gang, ranging from drug sales to assaults and murder, including an assault on a member who had turned informant against the gang. All his operations, though, they came to a halt in 2020 when he was indicted by federal authorities in a RICO case against him and the East Coast Crips. His indictments, they came with a lot of charges too, including some allegations that mentioned murder and setups. One allegation states, on February 9th of 2003, within the East Coast Crips territory, Wallace using a handgun shot and murdered an East Coast Crip member who was publicly disrespecting Wallace. Also, on around November 13th, 2014, Wallace drove a co-conspirator to R&B's residence in a white Cadillac Escalade within rival territory and provided the co-conspirator with a 7.62 caliber AK-M47S assault rifle, which he used to murder R&B. Later that day, saying to a cooperating witness, "We just knocked that fool Red down," in reference to the murder of R&B. Doc was arrested in 2014, but even from jail, it's alleged that he was still one of the main enforcers of the Pacc East Coast Crips, with the paperwork stating that on April 18th of 2018, within the Metropolitan Detention Center, Wallace discussed with the co-conspirator the plan for an assault against a senior member of the East Coast Crips who was cooperating with law enforcement officers against the co-conspirator. Down the line during an interview in 2018, he stated, "I'm killing. I'm going to hell. I told you, thou shalt not kill. I didn't kill. I done killed a few motherfuckers, so I know I'm going to hell." In referencing to a rival gang member, he said, "You killing like a motherfucker like me." And I'm like, damn, they just putting in work. They got murders under their belt like a motherfucker, just like I got some under mine. In the end, Wallace, he was sentenced to 35 years to life in 2022. But trust, that barely scratched the surface of the Pacc East Coast Crips activities. They're still known as one of the most ruthless gangs in their area.
In neighborhoods rife with drug dealing and violent rivalries, suspicion is everywhere.
Hey, my man, is this your car?
The wrong car, the wrong face, in the wrong neighborhood.
Danger rating of the Pacc East Coast Crips. Hey, try a nigga from the East Coast, watch these niggas do the most. They known to smoke the ops, make you a pack or a ghost. Bars, nigga. Now, throughout most of Los Angeles history, South Central has been known as one of the most deadly areas in not only California, but America. And the East Coast Crips have been in the middle of it all. They're known for multiple setup murders, deadly shootouts, brutal beatings, strong-arm robberies, and a lot more other crazy shit. That's why when it comes to the Pacc East Coast Crips, they're gonna receive a danger rating of a 9.5 out of 10 based off of their history. But what do y'all think though? Did I go too low or too high? Y'all let me know in the comments, let's have a conversation about it. And give me some reasons on why too. That's just my opinion though. At this point, y'all heard a few stories, but there's a couple more other brutal situations that this gang has been involved in. For example, shortly after 6 p.m. on January 24th of 2005, William Johnson and his neighbor David Hamilton were standing on Johnson's front porch. They weren't gang members, but they knew that a local gang, the 5 Deuce Broadway Gangster Crips, claimed their neighborhood as territory. But the two, they grew up in the area, so they didn't think they'd be bothered by Broadway Gangster Crips. And they were right about that, but sadly, they didn't consider the potential dangers from enemy gangs. While the two were talking to each other, they noticed a gray Chrysler slowly driving by and stops a few houses down from them, followed by 2 men getting out of the car and walking back towards Johnson's house. And as they walked up, the Chrysler turned around and slowly drove in the same direction. The 2 men passed Johnson's house and asked, "What's up?" as they continued walking to the corner. This immediately spooks Johnson and Hamilton, and feeling concerned, Hampton tells Johnson to go inside. But as Johnson stepped off the porch, he saw 2 men walk back and begin to open fire on the 2 men. Hampton, he ran into Johnson's backyard, and as he made it to the back, he heard more gunshots and screaming. And after a minute, he returned back to the porch, where he found Johnson laying wounded. The 2 men in the Chrysler were gone at that point. Johnson, sadly, he died from a single gunshot wound to the chest, but the bullet passed through his body and wasn't recovered. 3 days later, on January 27th of 2005, after a short pursuit, the police stopped the Chrysler. The driver escaped, but the police caught the passenger, who was a member of the 6 Deuce East Coast Crips, a rival of the Broadway Gangster Crips, who claimed control of the area where the shooting occurred. Inside the Chrysler, police found papers disclosing that it was rented to the mother of another East Coast Crip member. A few days later, on February 9th of 2005, an investigating detective spoke with informant Timothy Gaines, a former gang member who for money and favorable treatment on a 2005 burglary charge provided information about the gang to law enforcement. Gangs knew Hunter and knew he was an active East Coast Crip member. He also knew that the Broadway gangster Crips and the East Coast Crips were in the midst of a war and would stay engaged in back and forth shootings with each other. A few days before the Johnson murder, gangs saw Hunter carrying a handgun. And a few days after the murder, gangs encountered Hunter, who bragged about how he and another East Coast member, known as Asmo, just did a shooting on the Broadway. Gangs also spoke with Asmo, who said he was a shooter in the Johnson murder. About 5 months later, on June 17th of 2005, police apprehended Hunter after a short foot pursuit. They interviewed him 3 times. In the first interview, he denied being present at the Johnson murder. In the second one, though, after initially denying any knowing about any of the crimes, Hunter admitted that 3 more fellow gang members picked him up in a Chrysler and drove him to the crime scene. Hunter claimed, however, that he was unarmed and didn't know that the shooting was planned and stayed in the car, which he said remained parked, while the other 3 men got out and fired the shots, saying after which the shooters got back in the car and drove off. Hunter said he got out of the car a few blocks away. In the third interview, Hunter gave a familiar account in the second interview, but now said that only 2 other gang members picked him up in the Chrysler, both of whom got out during the shooting. Hunter again claimed the car remained parked during the shooting and that he didn't know his companions intended to shoot anybody. A police gang expert testified that Hunter was an admitted East Coast Crip member, and the Broadway Crips and the East Coast Crips were rivals. And in 2005, the 2 gangs were in the midst of a war and would stay engaged in retaliatory shooting against each other. And in participating in such shootings serves the gang's purposes by enhancing their status and instilling fear amongst their rivals. As part of their testimony, the expert opined that the hypothetical shooting, similar to the murder and the attempted murder in this case, will further both the gangs and the participants' purpose by prestige within the gang. Ultimately, due to statements to several interrogations, the court sentenced Edward Hunter to 50 years to life in prison. This is just one of the many cases I've found when it comes to the Broadway gangster Crips and the East Coast Crips in their war with each other. Particularly though, when it comes to the 6-pack East Coast Crips, it's another deadly case that played out with the Broadways, but to get into all that, we have to address who this gang is today.
These guys think they're warriors out here. And much like soldiers or warriors, they'll protect their territory.
Who are the 6-pack East Coast Crips? When it comes to the 6-pack, this gang, they ain't cutting no slack. If they catch you lacking and they got a strap, trust, you getting put on your back. Bars, nigga. The 6-pack East Coast Crips, they're a subset of the East Coast Crips in Los Angeles, California. Its subsets include the 6 Deuce East Coast Crips, the 6-6 East Coast Crips, the 6-8 East Coast Crips, and the 6-9 East Coast Crips. They're an African-American street gang, but they're known to put on other races. Matter of fact, it's a lot of Hispanics and a couple whites from this gang as well. Hey, look, the East Coast Crips in general though, they got some bad bitches. Now, it's definitely some rad-looking bitches and that hoes from every gang. But the East Coast Crips, they definitely be having more baddies than most. Hey, tell them I had a couple licks with them, go on a couple missions, you know what I'm saying? Just come fuck with a real one, you know what I'm saying?
I'm literally the perfect example of why you shouldn't homegirls. This is why y'all shouldn't homegirls. Cause then you got like me waiting on your motherfucking block with all the weapons to beat you with, nigga, on Crip, and I'm gonna sit here all day, look. I got hammers, bottles, sticks. I even got a fucking seat. And I'm not going nowhere because I ain't got shit to do today. I got time today because I'm ready for any one of you niggas to pop up. Drag, chill, somebody come to the hood because I'm bored. I'm waiting. I've been here for like 30 minutes now.
Nah, I'm playing. I don't want no issues. Anyways, your neighborhood, it stretches from Avalon Boulevard to the 110 freeway, between 60th Street and 69th Street, which covers a big section of Los Angeles. When it comes to cars, they're part of the Deuce line, and they also fall in their neighborhood car as well. So they're naturally going to be close with gangs like the Rolling 60s and other Rolling O members, and be rivals of gangs like the Hoovers and most Crips that fall under the Gangster Crip car, like the H-Ray Gangster Crip. And trust, these niggas have some of the most violent rivalries with the 6-pack East Coast Crips. But at the same time, there's a lot of older members that have a lot of respect for this section of the East Coast Crips because of how they roll. In fact, the East Coast Crips, particularly the 6 Deuces and the 6-9s, are known across Los Angeles as being some of the most deadly East Coast Crips of them all. That's because when it comes to war with their enemies, they never folded, caught more than a few bodies, and they roll with some of the most militant members. They've battled other deadly gangs like the Florencia 13s, the Mad Swan Bloods, the Broadway Gangster Crips, the Kitchen Crips, and the Hoovers all at once. And trust, this wasn't just casual beats. It was war with all of them. On December 9th of 2020, at around 5:56 p.m., Tyrone Woodford, a family Swan Blood member, and fellow gang members were standing in front of an apartment building on East 91st Street, particularly the 91st Street building, which was a known family Swan Bloods hangout. They were smoking and waiting for fellow gang members to pull up when they were approached by 3 East Coast Crip members, including Nijian Samuel Gibson, who opened fire on the family Swan Bloods, hitting Woodford in the process. Police were called and Woodford was taken by paramedics, but unfortunately, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. Los Angeles Police Detective Jocelyn Bagnat was assigned to investigate the homicide. She reviewed surveillance video of the night of the shooting, taken from the security cameras in front of the 91st Street building, and 2 nearby residences. One video showed a sedan and an SUV drive to East 91st Street and continued down the street. Then 3 individuals walked towards 91st Street. Santa created a firing line and then started shooting towards the direction where the victims were standing. Another surveillance video showed 3 individuals running away towards West 91st Street, with the last individual from the group running away shooting a couple times towards the apartment building. Detective Jocelyn, she also ended up viewing surveillance videos from other locations and determined that the sedan and the SUV drove to the 62nd Street location after the shooting. Detective Jocelyn also viewed surveillance videos from other locations and determined that the sedan and the SUV drove to 62nd Street after the shooting. And lastly, the detectives viewed surveillance videos from cameras in the 62nd Street area taken from approximately 3:30 p.m. to approximately 11 p.m. One video showed that at around 3:51 p.m., Gibson, dressed in all blue, double parked his blue Audi at the 62nd Street location. Gibson exited his vehicle and spoke with several individuals, including Wilson and Perry. He then leaves that location in his blue Audi at around 4:45 p.m. At 5:51, several individuals took the back license plates off a blue sedan that was double parked in front of the entrance to a car wash on 62nd Street. Wilson then got into the driver's seat and Brown got into the front passenger seat, and Perry got into the front passenger seat of a black SUV that was registered to him as the owner. At 5:54 p.m., the blue sedan and the black SUV left the 62nd Street location, about 12 minutes before the Woodford shooting. Based on the surveillance videos, the detective identified Brown, Perry, and Wilson as the East Coast Crip members involved in the Woodford shooting. Six-pack member Perry was soon arrested and interrogated, and later testified that he was a former member of the East Coast Crips from the 6'6" set. Perry identified Gibson and Mario as members of the East Coast Crips. Perry knew Gibson as Young Snoop or Young Snoopy, Mario as Eastwood. Also sent on the afternoon of December 9th, 2020, Perry went to the 62nd Street location to get his back SUV washed and to hang out. Lil Habit, an East Coast Crip member, told Perry about a party, and Perry agreed to attend with another gang member, Infant Shorty. But Perry said he had a suspended license, so he asked Lil Habit to drive his vehicle. Lil Habit drove the black SUV to 91st Street and parked his vehicle in front of a store. Perry then heard gunshots and stopped in his feet. Lil Habit then drove back to the 62nd Street location. As they were driving back, Perry noticed another car turning to 62nd Street. He testified that he didn't realize he was involved in the shooting until he was pulled over by police and told his vehicle had been used in a homicide. Here's the thing, the East Coast Crips and the Swan Bloods are mortal enemies and have been in a deadly war with each other for decades. So this shooting, it was really only another progression in these two gangs' hatred toward each other. And when it comes to this situation, it was only the beginning. On the night of December 10th of 2020, Family Swan Bloods had a candlelight vigil for Woodford in a driveway at 91st Street building, where several fellow gang members attended. At approximately 11:45 p.m., Nathaniel Caldwell, a Family Swan Blood member, stopped by the Woodford vigil to pay his respects for about 10 to 15 minutes. And as he and other blood members were doing so, a car drives off and lets off multiple shots, hitting Caldwell once. He drove himself to the hospital and was released later that night. But sadly, he wasn't the only victim. Los Angeles police officer Michael Woods arrived at the scene in response to a call about a shooting. Woods found Ayanna Treadway, a Family Swan Blood member, laying face down in the middle of the driveway at the 91st Street building. Treadway was shot in the back and a gunshot perforated her heart and right lung. She was taken to a hospital, but unfortunately she died. Officer Woods assisted in canvassing the scene for evidence. He found approximately 50 to 60 spent shell casings on the street and the sidewalk. He also recovered a key ring at the scene containing an Audi key and one or more house keys. He noticed the keys after another officer kicked them, saying he didn't use gloves when he picked up the keys from the ground because he believed the keys had been discarded by a member of the Family Swan Blood members who was arrested at the vigil earlier and who might have stored an illegal firearm in the vehicle. Officer Woods walked up and down the streets, pressing the unlock button, attempting to locate the vehicle, but he was unsuccessful, so he turned the keys over to another police officer to begin their investigation. The detectives couldn't locate any eyewitnesses to the shooting. However, a detective obtained surveillance videos on the night of the December 10th shooting from about 20 cameras from different angles. Surveillance footage from a house near the 91st Street building showed a small SUV that was followed by a dark-colored four-door sedan. The detective then used surveillance videos to track the two vehicles before and after the shootings to the 70th Street location, which was the 6'9" East Coast Crips hangout. The detective opined that the December 10th shooting was gang-related because the rival Swan blood members were shot. The shootings occurred the day after Wolford, a family Swan blood member, had been killed, and the shooting was in the same location as the Wolford shooting. Further, the circumstances of the December 9th and 10th shootings were similar, with the two vehicles driving up to the 91st Street building and multiple people exiting the vehicles and shooting at the family Swan blood member. Based on the similarities between the two shootings, the detective reviewed the December 9th surveillance videos at the 62nd Street location. She observed a blue Audi SUV in the video that had similar shape to the vehicle she saw in the December 10th surveillance video at the 70th Street location, including the shape of the windows and the racks on top of the vehicle. Due to the surveillance evidence and multiple jail phone calls revealing the details of the shooting and a thorough investigation, the court, they sentenced Gibson to a term of 57 years to life for the murder of Tyrone Wolford and Ayanna Treadway and the attempted murder of Nathaniel Caldwell. The killings between these two gangs was insane. I found over 10 cases of this deadly war between these gangs. And like mentioned, this war was going on while the 6'9" East Coast Crips and the Pacc East Coast Crips were going to war with several other militant gangs, including the Hoovers and the Broadway Gangster Crips. And in each of them, they stood on business as well, where the Redditors were commenting. In the late 1960s throughout the 2010s, there were shootouts down there every week in this section. They were going on missions all the time. 6'9" was one of those gangs where your put on was a mission. But to get deeper into why this gang is well known today, we have to get into their rivals.
Who is that? Shit outside, homeboy. Fuck stains, nigga. Come outside, nigga. Take it outside, homeboy. East Coast, nigga. Come outside, nigga. I'm hurt, nigga. I'm hungry, nigga. Come outside, you a bitch, bro. You toast K, right? I ain't got money in his pocket. Easy. Come on, bro.
Rivals of the Pacc East Coast Crips. The East Coast Crips, they got a lot more enemies than most. That's because when it's wartime, they see red. They saw smoke. Bars, nigga. Now, the Pacc East Coast Crips are allies with the East Coast Crips, of course, and the Neighborhood Crips as well. And they're also allies of gangs that fall under the Deuce Car as well. So like mentioned, they're gonna get along with a lot of gangs that fall under the Rolling Oak Crips. They're also gonna be cool with a couple gangster Crips as well, due to their proximity and the history of these gangs. For example, they get along with the 4-Pack Gangster Crips, which include gangs like the 4 Deuce, 4 Trey, and the 4-8 Gangster Crips. Lastly, they're gonna have neutral standing with the Valencia 13 after years of war. This feud that stemmed from an incident in the 1990s, alleging that the East Coast Crips robbed the Valencia 13 of a large quantity of narcotics, but after the two gangs engaged in one of the most deadly wars in Los Angeles for close to 2 decades, after a couple minutes, the two engaged in a truce in 2019. That's pretty much it though when it comes to allies and peace treaties. Due to their alliance with every other member of the East Coast Crips and the Neighborhood Crips, the 6-Pack East Coast Crips have more than a few enemies. They're rivals of the Mass Swan Bloods, the Pablo Bishop Bloods, the Bloodstone Villains, and all sections of the Hoover. They have a history of beef when it comes to the Grape Street Crips, but they mainly feud with gangs that fall under the Gangster Crip Corps, such as the HOA Gangster Crips, the Avalon Gangster Crips, and the Broadway Gangster Crips. Y'all heard one case about the Broadways and the 6-Pack, but another intense situation that definitely gives another example of the case of violence between these two gangs played out in the 2010. On March 29th of 2012, 2 LAPD officers were driving their vehicle near the intersection of Broadway and 53rd Street in Los Angeles. They were patrolling the area because there have been numerous recent shootings between 2 street gangs, the Broadway Gangster Crips and the East Coast Crips. As the officer prepared to turn left from southbound Broadway onto 53rd Street, he noticed a white minivan had stopped on the eastbound lane on 53rd Street, just north of a taco stand located at the southeast corner of the intersection. The officers heard about 4 to 5 gunshots. They then saw a black hand holding a gun extended from the right side of the van and saw a muzzle flash. People standing near the taco stand then scattered, including a black member who ran south on Broadway. The officer described the men as wearing gang attire, loose clothing, dark clothing, and a hat. The gun extended from the van was pointed south towards the direction of the man running south. The van then speeds down 53rd Street, with the officers then getting in pursuit. The chase covered many city blocks, with the van making several turns. Also, on San Pedro and 61st Street, passerby Priscilla saw a man jump out of the van and walk into a nearby building as the van continued down the street. The police passed by a little while later. Officer Lambert and Lopez caught up to the van as they hit a tree and stopped on Avalon Boulevard south of 61st Street. The officers then seen East Coast Crip member John Gullery exit the van, running away on foot. He apprehended him later in the back of a nearby property. They also apprehended the man who jumped out of the van on South San Pedro Street and 61st and found a revolver with 4 spent shell cases under the car near the location he jumped out. The man was identified as Wesley Janet. At the time he was apprehended, the officers observed Janet rubbing dirt on his hands, which the officers testified may have been an effort to disguise residue on his hands left from a handgun. Guadalupe C., who had been working at the taco stand at the time of the shooting, exited from the stand about 10 minutes after the incident and discovered a bullet hole in the windshield of his truck parked nearby on Broadway. A police officer then recovered a bullet from the truck's interior. At trial, the prosecution proceeded on the theory that Janet had fired the gun and that John had driven the van. The prosecution argued that Janet's target was a black male who ran down Broadway after the shots rang out. Officer Lopez testified as a gang expert, opined that John and Janet were members of the East Coast Crips, also stated that the East Coast Crips and the Broadway Gangster Crips were rivals. The area on 53rd Street and Broadway was within the boundaries claimed by the Broadway Gangster Crips. In the corner with the taco stand was a known location for the Broadway Gangster Crips to congregate. Presented with a hypothetical scenario with facts mirroring those of an incident at the taco stand, the officer opined that such a shooting attempt would benefit that of a criminal street gang. Thankfully, nobody was killed during this incident, but it gives yet another example of how deadly the Pacc East Coast Crips can get when it comes to their enemy. It's simple whenever they cross paths, and going on missions with them is considered a rite of passage. That's because this gang have had and have more than a few prominent members known for their brutal ways. Prominent figures are the Pacc East Coast Crips. The East Coast Crips are 4 different gangs aligned with each other and are composed of some of the oldest Crip sets in Los Angeles. Because of these factors, this gang is going to have more than a few prominent members in it. But first off, I found a long list of members who are no longer with us. Some of them include Leroy Hill, also known as Lil Bugsby, who was shot and killed by Florencia 13 member on March of 2016 on 65th Street as he sat in his parked car. Davion Jones, also known as Baby Rob, who was shot and killed on February 15, 2023 outside the Louisiana Fried Chicken on Western and King Boulevard. Other members no longer with us include 2 Ducky, 8 Ball, Big Asmo, BJ, Lil Bam, Bam Bam, Bam J, William Major, also known as Big Bub, Billy Bird, Bo, Big CL, and Baby CL. Definitely rest in peace to them, and y'all let me know if any other members are no longer with us. Let their names live on. They also have a lot of OGs who put in a lot of work for the Six Pack as well. Some of them include Paul Wallace, also known as Lil Duck, and Uncle Bill. It's also Tiny J Nina, Nina Boy, and Too Cool. Lastly, the Six Pack have a couple of rappers who've been making noise in the music scene. Player Waves, by far, is one of my favorite rappers from this area. This thing got a dope ass flow. It's not aggressive, but his lyrics pull you into the music. He kind of reminds you of a Mexican Stupid Young mixed with a Draco the Ruler. But y'all tap in ASAP to see what I'm talking about. Definitely check out that 20 Ball and his newest track, Rear End. Pause. It's also Jet Beezy. Bro's cool too, has his own unique flow. It's gangstered out, aggressive, and catchy. Man, I feel like sliding on the ops, like fucking a couple bitches. Shit, robbing niggas and all that after listening to Bro. Y'all tap into that What We On or Get Cash ASAP. You won't be disappointed. Also, it's day 3. Let's make it clear, most of these rappers are from the Stink Team, so their flow is definitely gonna resemble Draco the Ruler. In day 3, he's a big example of this. Don't get it fucked up though. He still has a unique rap style, and it's hard, but it reminds me of Draco the Ruler for sure. Another rapper includes Young Chill. Bro cool too, but I only found like 1 song he was featured on. If y'all know any other tracks of him or any other artists, y'all let me know in the comments. Let's get their music heard. Current state of the Pacc East Coast Crips. Los Angeles has seen several transitions when it comes to gangs and the power structure of the streets, and the East Coast Crips have definitely been in the middle of it all. They've engaged in several deadly wars, taken out plenty enemies, and lost a few along the way. But when it comes to the current state of the Pacc East Coast Crips, today, they're still one of the most active gangs in their section, and on top of that, They're known as one of the most militant gangs of the East Coast Crips. In addition, they've spread beyond Los Angeles, having a presence in Northern California and even having sets outside of the state, like New York, Baltimore, and Texas. But y'all let me know if they have a presence in any other state. Even with several gang injunctions and indictments, stricter laws on gang members and deadly members being locked up, this gang, they continue to thrive due to a strong foundation of members, daily activities, money-making scheme, and militant means of operation, which is why they're so active today. That's it for the East Coast Crips though. You got any crazy stories about these guys? Any close calls? Also, did I miss anything? Did I get anything wrong? Y'all let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video or if you're part of the Danger Gang. Y'all stay safe and dangerous out there.